Chapter 1, The Hollow Invitation. The invitation arrived on brittle, yellowed parchment, the kind that seems pulled from the pages of forgotten history. No return address adorned the envelope, only the name Adeline Harper written in spidery ink. Adeline, a woman accustomed to solitude, frowned as she fingered the rough edge of the paper. Her apartment, small and devoid of warmth, trembled faintly with the sounds of the bustling city outside. But the words on the page seemed to hush the world into a sinister silence. You are cordially invited to the opening of the Thornwood Estate. Your presence is requested at dusk tomorrow. No companions allowed. There was no signature, no explanation. Thornwood Estate was a name she hadn't heard in years, not since she was a child. It was an estate perched on the edge of the small, forgotten town where her parents had disappeared 20 years ago. The next night, despite her gnawing apprehension, she arrived at Thornwood. The gate stood wide open, their rusted hinges moaning in the wind. The house itself loomed in the twilight, its windows like the empty sockets of a skull. The towering oaks surrounding the property clawed at the indigo sky, their gnarled branches seeming almost alive. Adeline hesitated at the threshold, clutching the letter tightly. The door swung open on its own, revealing a cavernous hallway drenched in shadows. The faint scent of decay and earth greeted her. "Welcome, Adeline," came a voice, low, and so cold it seemed to seep into her marrow. It echoed down the dark corridor, but no one was there. Chapter 2, The Portrait Room. The house seemed endless, its halls twisting and turning like arteries through a corpse. Each room Adeline passed felt worse than the last, layers of dust, rotting furniture, and the faint impression that someone had just stepped out moments before she arrived. Yet, it was the room at the center of the house that truly froze her blood. It was a gallery of portraits. Dozens of faces lined the walls, their painted eyes following her every move. Men, women, children, some regal, others draped in rags, but all with expressions too lifelike, too filled with knowing. She paused before one painting in particular. It was of a woman who looked unnervingly like her. Same sharp cheekbones, same wary eyes. Beneath the portrait, a brass plaque read: Adeline Harper, 1873 to 1895. Her breath caught. "That's impossible," she whispered, stepping back. The floor creaked, and for a moment, she swore the painted Adeline smirked. From behind her, the door slammed shut. She spun around, but the room was empty. Empty, except for the soft rustling sound that began to fill the room, like 1,000 whispered secrets rising from the walls. She turned back to the portraits. The figures in the paintings were no longer still. They shifted, their painted heads tilting, their mouths silently moving as though chanting an incantation she couldn't hear. Something brushed past her shoulder. Cold as the grave. Chapter 3, The Basement's Hunger. Adeline ran blindly, her footsteps echoing down the labyrinthine corridors. The house seemed to shift around her, its walls pressing closer. It wasn't long before she found herself at the top of a staircase spiraling down into blackness. "No," she whispered, backing away. But the house had other plans. The floor trembled beneath her, and the very wood seemed to bend, pushing her forward. She stumbled, then fell, tumbling down the stairs into the choking dark. The air was damp and cold, filled with the faint metallic tang of blood. When she lit a match, the feeble flame revealed walls lined with stone and rusted chains dangling from hooks. In the center of the room was a pit, deep, circular, and unfathomable. A low growl rose from the pit, vibrating through her chest. She edged closer, peering into its depths. Something moved below, something massive and writhing. Eyes glinted in the darkness, too many to count, all fixed on her. Then the whispers returned, louder now, pressing against her skull. "Feed it! Feed it! Feed it!" The chains rattled, and the growl turned into a deafening roar. Adeline backed away, only to trip over something. She looked down and screamed, a skeletal hand protruded from the earth, clutching her ankle. Chapter 4, The House's Secret. She yanked her leg free and scrambled back up the stairs, her heart pounding. But the house was alive now, its doors slamming, walls groaning, and the shadows in its corners growing darker and deeper. She burst into a study, slamming the door shut behind her. On the desk lay an old leather-bound journal. She flipped it open with trembling hands. "The estate demands blood," the first page read in shaky handwriting. "Only then will it remain dormant." The entries detailed decades of sacrifices. Strangers lured to the house, their lives offered to the thing below. The last entry made her blood run cold. "Adeline Harper will be the final sacrifice. Her blood will seal the curse forever." She staggered back. "No! This isn't real," she whispered. But deep down, she knew it was. The house wasn't just a building, it was a living thing, a parasite feeding on the terror and lives of those who entered. The door behind her splintered. The shadows spilled into the room, clawing at her legs, pulling her toward the hallway. Chapter 5, The Final Choice. The house dragged her to the pit again, its dark maw yawning like the entrance to hell. The whispers rose to a fever pitch, now a chorus of voices screaming for her death. But as she stood on the edge, staring into the void, something within her snapped. She wouldn't be its victim. "I'm not afraid of you," she shouted, her voice echoing in defiance. The pit trembled, as if enraged. The whispers faltered, replaced by a guttural roar. Adeline grabbed one of the rusted chains and swung it into the pit, using it to descend. If it wanted her, it would have to face her on her terms. The descent felt endless, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom, she found the source of the horror, a mass of writhing, shadowy tendrils, pulsating like a heart. Eyes blinked open across its surface, and a maw filled with jagged teeth gaped wide. Adeline reached into her bag and pulled out the one thing she'd brought, a vial of gasoline and a match. "You've taken enough from me," she hissed, hurling the vial into the mass and striking the match. Flames roared to life, consuming the creature. It howled, its screams shaking the very foundation of the house. The shadows retreated, the whispers silenced. As the fire spread, Adeline climbed back up, the house groaning and collapsing around her. She barely made it out as the estate crumbled into ash, taking its cursed legacy with it. For the first time in years, Adeline felt something like peace. But as she walked away, she noticed the envelope in her pocket, no longer blank. On its surface, written in the same spidery ink, were the words, "We will see you again."